we are the beneficiaries of America's past violence. And there's nothing that's been built. There's not a single government that's been built in this world that has not been built on the back of violence. I want to talk about this question that has been brewing on the left for a little while since Richard Spencer was punched. There's an interesting question that I think is worthwhile discussing. It's whether or not there's a question of whether or not we should actively engage in punching Nazis. And it's actually a deeper question than that, because there's so much for us to take care of and work on and fight for and oppose to a certain extent where I really don't care if you punch a Nazi or not. That's your business. But there seems to be a question brewing that really boils down to a question of pacifism versus not being a pacifist. And the reason I want to talk about it is because it's far too much. I have to talk about it on air. There's just far too much to deal with this unless I wrote a series of articles. So the question that remains is really surrounding the Antifa movement and the Black Bloc. And before I even start talking about the Black Bloc and the Antifa movement, let's just put something out here. Let's first define. And I don't know that you can really define them, but maybe I can describe them for most people. Whenever you see a left-leaning protest, there's always a group embedded in that protest that you could describe as insurrectionists, you can describe as anarchists, you could describe them as rioters, you could describe them in a lot of ways depending on what event that you actually catch them at. And so there's always been a long-standing opposition from the left against these groups, because these groups do undermine peaceful protests. They do. Let's just be real, right? The case in point is Washington, D.C., Trump's inauguration. There was a socialist rally where thousands of people gathered, a beautiful protest, peaceful and organizing, galvanizing moment, right? What we need people organized. We need people galvanized and put into action, moved into action. And 2 blocks away in D.C. Was the Black Bloc, where they did their thing and essentially devolved into a full-out riot with fires and property damage and Starbucks. Everybody was freaking out because Starbucks glass was broken and a limousine was burned down, and a lot of people were arrested, including journalists. And the only takeaway from DC, not a single mention about the socialist rally. All the attention was on the Black Bloc. And to this extent, they do undermine leftist movements. And to be sure, let's be sure about something. They don't agree with, some of them do. It's a very diverse group. They're not a monolith. They have a lot of different ideologies represented. The one thing that I think you could take away is the willingness to use violence, as a political tool. And it completely undermines the leftist movements, because whenever you see a leftist movement, there's going to be this group here. Now, what I started to say about the Black Bloc is this. They don't give a damn about what we think about them. They don't give a damn about our ongoing debate of whether or not we should use violence or not. They are going to do whatever the hell they want to do. So be it. Let them do that. The question that remains is whether or not or how leftists should look at this movement, and not even the movement, about violence. And I really did bite off more than I have time to chew, but we're gonna chew on it, and because I think it's an important conversation that has to be had and probably debated about, and whatever the case may be. Because the reason it's even up for debate is because most people won't admit it, or maybe you will, but a lot of people won't. As much as we have opposed the methods of the Black Bloc in past times, all of a sudden the Black Bloc was really, really, I started to like them once they knocked the shit out of Richard Spencer. I'm just going to be honest with you. I started to like them a whole lot more. And a lot of people did. And then we even started going into conversations about whether or not it's actually okay. Should we should we punch Nazis? And you have this ongoing debate amongst leftists. Noam Chomsky weighed in by virtue of a question that someone emailed him. And they asked him, is it okay for us to punch Nazis? And his response was, ethically, no. Strategically, it undermines your efforts. And he says, but practically, when you go into the realm of violence, the person that is the most brutal wins. And that's not us, saying that we're not the most brutal. And all that sounds pretty reasonable and pretty rational. But the question that I really, who was it? Carl Baer. He actually said something really brilliant. Carl Baer from the Baltimore, actually he's not with the Baltimore Post anymore. I forgot where he is now. But he's basically saying we're really talking about pacifism versus not being pacifist. And the reason this is even a conversation is because if people really believe that Donald Trump is a fascist and is going to carry out things in a Hitler-esque way, then to what extent are we willing to oppose him? And the immediate response has been, the knee-jerk response by some has been, see a Nazi, punch a Nazi. I don't know. Here's where I stand, and this is all I can say, and this is all anyone can say, because it becomes an individual issue. It becomes an individual, what do you believe at the end of the day? And it has always been my position on this show, as well as in my life, is that I have never been a peace at any cost. I am not a pacifist. I don't run to violence, nor do I think that we're at a place right now today where we should honestly be considering using violence as a means for our political ends. Clausewitz said, war is the continuation of politics by another means. So violence is a political tool. And for people to dismiss violence as a political tool is ahistorical. It has always been a political tool. I just don't think it's a political tool that we have to use now. This is not, we are not at a place where we really have to consider, are we going to take up arms and fight violently? This whole thing about punching the Nazi, whatever. I'm not going to judge. And if you punch them, I'm going to watch the video. Punch, I watch. I'm going to laugh. I'll share it. But is it something that we have to use as a strategy right now? I don't think that we're there. And this is and like I said, I preface this by saying this is what I believe. You believe what you want to believe. We're not there. However, embedded in this conversation is this pacifism that I disagree with so vehemently, because and I disagree with Noam Chomsky on this, even though I agree with him probably on 99% of things. I disagree with them here, because we have the benefit here in America. We have the benefit of living and benefiting from America's violence. And now we get to exist in this American political system that appears peaceful, that we can have a peaceful transition of power, and that we haven't had a civil war since the first Civil War, and that we have a way for people to express their dissent and go to the streets and all these types of things. We have this system that's set up, and we are the beneficiaries of this system. Everybody, even if we agree with it, we are the beneficiaries of it, where we don't have to literally take up arms to change America. We don't. But to completely dismiss the necessity and the possibility of violence as a political tool is completely ahistorical. We are just living in a generation where we don't have to live in that reality in America. Go across seas, and it's a totally different story. So this idea that we at all costs should not be willing to engage in violence is so ahistorical. And I keep saying that because there's nothing that's been established in this world politically. There's not a government that's been established that has not been established on the back of violence. Through the means of violence. There's no peace. There's no peace that we've had that has not been on that has not been brought by some violence. This world order that we have right now is the result of World War II. The post-World War II is brought the peace that we've had. And we can argue about the margins. We can argue about the proxy wars. We can argue about all the ongoing wars. We can argue about the Middle Eastern, North African nations. We can argue about all that. But still, at the end of the day, we have a structure that is predominantly peaceful for us in America as a result of the fighting that we engaged in World War II. And this is why I say it this way. It is ahistorical for us to dismiss violence as a means of political gains, of a political end. But we're not anywhere remotely near that right now. We can organize. We need to organize. We could still change America at the ballot box. We can still change America by organizing. We can still change America by running for office. We can still change America in 100 different ways that doesn't require violence. But at the end of the day, at the logical extreme of it, we live in a violent reality. And to say, like Noam Chomsky said, that we are not, the person that's the most brutal will win, and we are not that people. I can't dismiss my beliefs. I can't dismiss my willingness to fight for what I believe in, even beyond peaceful protest. I can't. I mean, some things are worth fighting for. Some things are worth dying for. But we're not there right now. Organize. Protest. Vote. Call your senators. Boots on the ground. Speak out. Talk to your neighbor. Talk to people who didn't vote. Talk more than just on social media. There are 100,000 ways that we can fight back that doesn't include violence right now. But like I said when I started all this, we are the beneficiaries of America's past violence. And there's nothing that's been built. There's not a single government that's been built in this world that has not been built on the back of violence. And you can believe what you want to believe. I'm not trying to change what you believe. But for me, I'm not peace at any cost. I really believe that sometimes peace is going to cost. And somebody, hopefully we won't ever have it. Hopefully everything works out fine. I think it will. We're not there. We're not there where we actually have to pick up arms, right? We're nowhere near that point. And we can help avoid escalating to that point by avoiding unnecessary violence. You know, the one thing that can go wrong is you go out and punch a Nazi because that's all the rave, and the Nazi pulls a gun and kills you. And then that escalates. We're not there. But to completely dismiss the necessity for violence or the use of violence to build a society, I still would like for anyone who is a complete pacifist to show me in world history where there has been a society built that has been able to exist completely without violence. Sometimes you got to fight. Sometimes you got to fight, and some people have to be willing to fight. Hopefully our children don't have to, because we have the benefit of not having to right now. But to completely dismiss the reality that someday someone is going to have to use violence is such a defeatist mentality. It betrays what you believe in. It tells me that you don't really believe in what you're talking about enough to fight for it and to die for it. So let's just all be grateful that right now we don't even really have to even have this conversation. Right now, all we have to do is go out and organize. And everything else should take care of itself.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.